Hello, everyone. Hi, Dr. Berzin. Welcome to the second part of the Dr. Alexander Berzin session on issues concerning developing compassion in the context of voidness. The Lama Tsongkhapa Institute is very grateful for Dr. Berzin for accepting our invitation again to be our guest of honor. This presentation is part of our free Master Program Talk series, which aims to explore Buddhist teachings in depth while providing glimpses into the FPMT Masters Program curriculum. Dr. Alexander Berzin is a renowned scholar and teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, an accomplished translator and acclaimed author. After completing his Ph.D. at Harvard, he devoted nearly 3 decades of his life studying in India, under the guidance of some of the greatest Tibetan Buddhist masters of our times, and serving as an interpreter for His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and his senior teachers. His legacy continues through the Berzin archives and studybuddhism.com, making Tibetan Buddhist teachings available worldwide. After the presentation, if time allows, we give priority to the master program students for a Q&A, and then we open it up to the room. With that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Berzin. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm very delighted to be able to continue our discussion of voidness, in the context of the three types of compassion mentioned in the introductory verse of Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, engaging in Madhyamaka in the middle way. Let me start by just briefly reviewing what we spoke about last time for those who maybe weren't there. We were speaking about the third type of compassion, what's usually called unaimed compassion. It is, if you want to fill out that term, it's referring to compassion lacking a self-established focal support. That's what unaimed is referring to, and we'll get to what a focal support is. All phenomenon, including persons, are devoid of this self-established existence. That's usually translated as inherent existence, but it's existence established by something within itself. And this is refuted. All the other tenet systems besides Prasangika assert it, but Asanga says that, not Asanga, Prasangika says that you can only establish the existence of something merely in terms of imputation. So that led us to starting the discussion of what is meant by imputation. And this is a very difficult word. It doesn't have terribly much meaning in English, and I don't know what about the other languages in which it's translated. In order to get an idea of what the word means, we need to look at the Sanskrit and Tibetan translation, original term. The original term in Sanskrit is prajnapti, and prajnapti comes from the word prajna, to know, basically. And prajnapti is causative, so it is caused to be known, something that's caused to be known. It's caused to be known by something else, namely a basis. And the Tibetan word for it, dak, comes from the word to tie. And so it refers to something which is tied to a basis and can only be known in terms of that or together with that basis. So the opposite of that is something which is self-sufficiently knowable, that it can be known by itself without being tied to a basis or anything like that. And that is something which is refuted in Prasangika. There are two types of imputedly knowable phenomenon. So something that is an imputed phenomenon is something that is imputedly knowable with a tie to a basis. And there are two types of that, two levels of that. There are coarse imputedly knowable phenomenon and subtly imputedly knowable phenomenon. Last time we spoke about the coarse level of this, And this is referring to three types of imputedly knowable phenomenon. Again, difficult to come up with translation terms for them. I refer to it as imputations, conceptual labels, and designations. All of them are the same word in Tibetan or in Sanskrit. Imputation phenomenon are non-static, so changing, impermanent, non-congruent affecting variables. These are the things that are neither forms of physical phenomenon or ways of being aware of something. And these would include persons, living beings, and static phenomenon as well. So permanent phenomenon like voidness and space. These are factually tied to a basis. It's a fact that they are tied to them. They can only be known in terms of them. They are factual features of the basis, and they are inseparable from the basis. They can be known with sense consciousness or mind consciousness, and either conceptually or non-conceptually. To cognize them, first you have to cognize the basis, and then simultaneously the person, simultaneously with the basis. In other words, we see some sort of thing moving over there, and we first see that, and then together with seeing that, we see also that it's a living being, so a person. So those are done, we cognize them simultaneously. Whereas voidness, which is now the way that it's asserted in Prasangika, is first you have to cognize the basis, and then the basis no longer has to appear. You can just non-conceptually focus on voidness. So this is specific to Prasangika. So that's an imputation phenomenon. They are factually tied to an object. You can't get rid of them. It's not optional. And they can be known conceptually or non-conceptually. Sense consciousness, we can see this is a living being, and so on. The next one was conceptual labeling, and that's with a static conceptual category. So a conceptual audio category or an object category. They're optional. And they can only be known conceptually. So they are mentally labeled on individual items that share a defining characteristic feature. So all these things over there that are moving and so on, what are they? They all share certain characteristic features, and we can put them all into the category or box dogs. So it's not tied to them. When you see it, you don't have to know that it's a dog. That's optional. But if we wanted to know what it was, we would conceptually, mentally label it with this concept. So that's a conceptual label. And similarly, we could say dog, somebody else could say dog, different voice, different volume, and all of those and different pronunciation. And we would all fit that into the audio category of they're saying the word dog, the sound of a word that is dog. So this is, that we're hearing the same thing, put it that way, that they're all saying the same thing. Otherwise, there's no way of making sense of what people are saying, speech. And then there's a designation, and a designation is with a word or a name, like the word dog. and that is designated on a category. And again, that's optional. The other dogs don't have, this word for dog, but they can all see the, different creatures fit into this category. So these are the coarse, imputedly knowable phenomenon, and that's what we covered the last time. And I hope that perhaps you've been able to study that and realize that and understand that they are quite distinct from each other, even though we tend to say mentally, all of these are mentally labeled as if they were all the same type of phenomenon, but really they're not. So we need separate words for them, separate ways of understanding. So the main topic for today is subtly imputable phenomenon. And this refers to all phenomenon, and it's talking about the relationship between a whole and its parts. This is also factual. All whole phenomenon are imputedly knowable on the basis of their parts. A whole is an imputation phenomenon where the imputation phenomenon itself is the whole and the basis are the parts. And here they're the same type of phenomenon. With the coarse ones, for instance, when we're speaking about this creature, this living being, the basis was a form of physical phenomenon, and the imputed phenomenon was a different type of phenomenon. It was this non-congruent affecting variable. Or if we talked about the voidness of this thing, that also was a different type of phenomenon. That's a static, permanent phenomenon. Here, when we're talking about the relationship between a whole and its parts, they're the same type of phenomenon. They are, a whole material object or a whole way of knowing something, a sequence of seeing something or thinking something or something like that. The whole and its parts, the moments of the thought are the same type of phenomenon. And here they are cognized simultaneously from the start. You don't have to first cognize a part and then cognize a whole. When you see a part, you also see the whole thing. This now gets very interesting if you really dive into it, which we're going to do. For a material object, let's say, for our discussion, I'm talking about dogs. So like this thing here that's moving, a sense consciousness, visual consciousness, for instance, cognizes just the appearance of only one moment at a time of only one sense quality, sight or physical sensation. We could be petting the thing, or smell, or we can hear, the dog barking. There's, each moment will only have one sense consciousness going. Actually, you could have two sense consciousnesses going at the same time, but those are different cognitions. We can see it and hear it barking at the same time while we're petting it. So we can have all of these simultaneously, but these are separate cognitions. So within one cognition, you only have one sense quality of the object and only one moment of it at a time. And even in, let's say the visual sight of this creature, of this thing, let's say if we're looking through, around the corner and the thing is walking and we only see the left side of a face. Now that's a part. That's all that we see. So now the question is, do we see a dog or not? Or we only see an appearance of what conventionally would be called the left side of a face. So what is appearing here are colored shapes, or if you want to look even more deeply, they are colored pixels. This is what is actually, what should we say, being cognized by the photosensitive cells of the eyes, the so-called cognitive sensors of the eyes. But so we're not seeing the rest of the body. We're not seeing the backside of the body. We're not seeing any, and we're not touching it. But the object, the whole object, extends over all these parts. It pervades all these parts, is the technical term. So all the sense qualities and the moments of, a sequence of moments while it is alive. Now, what about the defining characteristics? Defining characteristics are what the mental factor of distinguishing can distinguish. That's often called recognizing, but recognize implies that you knew it before. It just distinguishes it from everything else, what it's not. So there are, now the defining characteristic marks, again, are merely mentally labeled. Somebody made them up, of what these different things have in common. And these are the defining characteristic features that you find in the dictionary when you define it. So there are individually characterized defining characteristics of both a part and a whole object. So this thing is, it has the defining characteristics of being a part of something and the defining characteristics of a whole object. A whole object is called an object synthesis. It's a synthesis of all the sense qualities and the moments in which it retains its conventional identity, basically, if you want to put it in technical jargon. So an object synthesis. So it is a whole object. And also, and there's a defining characteristic of that, even in terms of these colored shapes that are, that we see, these pixels. And also, there is a kind synthesis. It's a kind of something. We might not know what it is, but it is the kind of something. That's this kind synthesis made up of, synthesized from all the objects that have a similar type of defining characteristic. So object synthesis and kind synthesis. So when we see only a part, we conventionally agree that we're seeing a whole object with a front and a back, a physical sensation when touched, a smell, and so on. Now, the whole and its parts share the same essential nature, but different isolators, these double negative things. In the non-Prasangika terminology, it's called the same substantial nature, not essential nature, it's a different word, but different isolators. I must say, I don't know whether Prasangika uses that term or not, but meaning that it is the same substantial entity, but you can differentiate, or isolate two different things about it. From one point of view, it's a part. From another point of view, it is the whole object. But so conceptually, you can do that. But Prasangika doesn't assert substantial entities. So that's why I don't know whether Prasangika actually uses this terminology. It might, with a different definition. It's not quite the same as sharing the same essential nature, but different isolates, which we'll get to in a moment. So the whole and the part share the same essential nature or substantial nature, but different isolators. So the isolator are, there are two types. So this is, technically, it's called an individually characterized object exclusion. So an object exclusion for short. It's a non-static, so an impermanent exclusion of everything other than itself. So it's referring to objects, whether it is objects that are non-conceptually known that you see, or categories can have this as well. When you exclude everything other than something, you're left with that something. So when you see a mental factor of distinguishing, you can distinguish all these individual characteristics of things. So I have to look at my notes. This is complicated. So an object exclusion. So it is everything other than this particular object. It is nothing other than this particular object. We have, this is what distinguishing is able to cognize. That what distinguishes it from everything everything else. So this is the isolator that isolates it or specifies it from everything else. So that's with every object. That is what characterizes it as being an individual object. Okay. Now, the big issue here is, how can you prove that when you cognize just a part, what you're seeing exists as a whole object, and that conventionally exists as a dog? How do you prove that? What establishes that? When we talk about different types of existence, we're talking about different ways of establishing or proving that something exists, which means that it's a validly knowable phenomenon. Okay, so and then the different tenet systems propose different ways of establishing, like that it performs a function. This is what some of the lower tenet systems assert. So you can only establish or prove the existence of what is accepted by convention as a dog by means of conceptual cognition. So that's the context within which you know what an object is, only within the concept of conceptual cognition of it, a concept. That there's a concept of something establishes that there is something, to put it in very, very rough language. Okay. Cognizing something, we're seeing these colored shapes. The basis for imputation is the aspect, what I've referred to often as a mental hologram of a part. Colored shapes or pixels of the left side of the head that arise in the cognition when seeing the dog, when you see this object. That's the basis for imputation. In other words, there is the word is an aspect, some aspect that reflects from the object. Vaibhashika says it reflects on the photosensitive cells of the eyes. Everybody else says it reflects on the cognition itself. So within the cognition, A form that appears is actually an aspect or reflection of the external object. Okay, so we have a reflection, an aspect of this object, a mirror reflection of it, which is like colored pixels, colored shapes. Okay, that's the basis for imputation that arises in the cognition when we see the dog. It has the defining characteristics of both what it appears to be, so it appears to be both a part and a whole, and how it appears to exist. It appears to exist with self-established existence, the existence established by the power of a self-nature found on the side of the object. So these are the appearance of what it is and the appearance of how it exists. So the defining characteristics of those. And these defining characteristics are not findable. Their existence is established merely in terms of conceptual labeling, as we were saying. Somebody made it up, a group of people, and put it in a dictionary. So the appearance, this is complicated. So I'm trying to go a little bit slowly, but this is not at all easy to understand. The appearance of what it is and the appearance of its manner of existence share the same essential nature as an appearance. So they're both, the essential nature is that this is the appearance of what seems to be a self-established whole dog. Common sense, what people would say is a dog, but different individually characterized object exclusions. It's the appearance of a whole dog and the appearance of self-established existence. This is different from the two truths, the appearance and the actual manner of existence, which is voidness. It's different. They have the same essential nature. Their essential nature here is voidness. Both the appearance and voidness have the same essential nature of being void of self-established existence, but different individually characterized object exclusions. So the different basis of the voidness. So the voidness of voidness and the voidness of appearance. When we talk about Buddha being able to see the two truths simultaneously, we're talking about a Buddha being able to see the voidness, which encompasses all phenomenon, that is the voidness from one point of, you can individually characterize, it is the voidness of everything other than, not of everything other, of everything that's left over. Nothing other than, the basis, which is the voidness of voidness and the voidness of all phenomenon. So this is different. We're not talking about that. We're talking about within the essential nature of an appearance itself. You can, conceptually isolate. That's the way to say it. You can conceptually isolate from the voidness that a Buddha sees. That is the voidness of all phenomenon, and it's the voidness of voidness. Here, what we're talking about is you can, when we're looking at the appearance of this object, you can conceptually isolate that it's an appearance of what it is and an appearance of how it exists. So let's not confuse that. Now, because the appearance has both the defining characteristics of a whole object and kind of object, and the defining characteristics of self-established existence, you can differentiate two inseparable aspects of the conceptual object category. Conceptual object category, a dog, without the word necessarily associated with it. So we see this part, this reflection of some colored shapes of what we conventionally would call left side of a head of a dog. And we now fit it into the category of a dog, a self-established dog. Because categories are, they all appear as self-established. Now, within that category, we can conceptually isolate two aspects. This is quite unique to Tsongkhapa. You can isolate that it is a category of a type of object, a type of whole object, and you can isolate that it is the category of self-established existence. So when we conceptualize something, we what appears is both an appearance of some type of object and the self-established existence of that. Okay, so we can differentiate these two aspects of the object category. And our analysis is based on that. Let me find my place. Both of these object categories have no form. An object category, conceptual category, I'm sorry, I shouldn't call it an object category. It is called an object category technically. Erase that sentence. That was confused. Delete that. It's called an object category. And the category is a conceptual exclusion phenomenon. That was what I was confusing. It's conceptual. You have conceptual isolators here, not the object isolators that we had before. So you can conceptually isolate the category of what it is and the category of how it exists. They exclude everything other than the specific category. So when we talk about a category is the appearing object of a conceptual cognition. Appearing object is what appear doesn't mean that you can see it. Appear just means that it arises. So this is what arises in the cognition, right, with on the consciousness, as it, literally they say that, but consciousness doesn't have a physical form, so it can't be on it. But that's the immediate object that is there, is the concept, the category. Category is like a concept that we have, an idea that we have. To put it in plain language, we all have a concept of a dog. We all have an idea of what a dog is. So this is the category. All dogs would fit into that category, our idea of what a dog is. And it's purely an idea that, there are defining characteristics that we've learned, to recognize, to distinguish that when we see this thing, that it's a dog, it's not a cat, it's not an elephant, and it's not a table. It's not any of these other things that are not a dog. So we can isolate it from all these other things and give it a name, dog. Hund in German. You can give it names in all sorts of different languages. So an isolator or a specifier, something is not what is not itself. It's nothing other than. For instance, if you had a mixed group of pets in a room and you put all the dogs in a cage, that would be the mental category. You could define those dogs as all the pets other than those outside the cage. So it's not the ones that are outside the cage. That's how you would define the ones that are inside the cage. Or if you draw a circle on a piece of paper, what's inside the circle is what is not outside the circle. So these are these isolators. I mean, that's important to understand, since everything that follows from that. It's an implicative negation phenomenon, these isolators. Okay, a negation phenomenon is not this. Implicative means that having negated the object of negation, which is, well, I mean, let's just talk about it in general. After negating the object of negation, it tosses in its footprint, literally, or the wake of a ship. But I think it's easier to understand it as its footprint. Once it has, eliminated its object to be refuted, it leaves in its footprint both a negation phenomenon and an affirmation phenomenon. Leaves both of them. Non-implicative one, like voidness, leaves only a negation phenomenon. So an implicative one would be you refute that it is a dog. I mean, you refute that it is that it's something, and what you're left with is it's not. You refute that it's that. It's not that. It's this. In other words, this is what is left. That's an implicative one. It's not this, it's that. It's something else. Whereas the non-implicative one is there's no such thing as that. Or there is no that. That doesn't leave anything, except there is no that. This is not an apple on the table, implies that it's something else. There is no apple on the table, doesn't leave anything, except that there is no apple on the table. So just a negation phenomenon. On the table is the location. Okay. So let's speak first about the aspect of the object category. That's the whole concept, common sense dog. Okay, what is that? Remember we had the category. Category is a specifier, a non-implicative negation phenomenon. And we were talking about two aspects of it that you can isolate. So what it is and the appearance of what it is and the appearance of how it exists. So now we'll just talk about the appearance of what it is. The negation phenomenon is nothing other than what fits into this category. So what the negation phenomenon, what it tosses is not this category of a whole common sense dogs and any items that fit in this category. So it's not that. So it's not the cage, and it's nothing, it is what is not the cage and and nothing that is not in the cage. That's horrible. We have the circle, and the circle on the paper leaves, once you have negated everything that's not in the circle, what it leaves is the absence of anything that is not in the circle. We're talking about what specifies in the circle. So what you're left with is what's outside the circle, which is not anything that's in the circle. That's the negation phenomenon. And you're left with an affirmation phenomenon, which is anything that would be in the circle. Do you follow that? I hope so. So you have the negation phenomenon. So what are you left with? You're left with, well, there's negation. There are all these things that are not in the circle, not a dog, and the affirmation phenomenon that there are items in this circle. Any item that would fit into the category of a dog. That is the affirmation phenomenon that we're left with. And the negation phenomenon, this isolator, tosses these explicitly, which mean that both of them appear, they arise in the cognition. But because they're both static phenomenon, they have no form. It's theoretical, in a sense. We're thinking of a category, the category, of dogs, and that excludes everything that's not a dog, and it must, include things that are dogs. So now, this is what is explicitly tossed, both a negation phenomenon and an affirmation phenomenon. Now, this implicative negation phenomenon, this isolator, this category, tosses something implicitly. Implicitly means, and it's also an affirmation phenomenon, and that would be a specific object, a specific common sense dog that fits into this category. In other words, explicitly, we had, well, there are things that are not in the category and there are things that are in the category. And implicitly, there must be some individual thing that's in the category. Okay, so far, this is what is going on in this conceptual cognition. Now, something that's in this category, an individual item that's in this category, that doesn't appear. That's implicit, that there must be something in this category. And so that also is theoretical. It's a static. Doesn't have a form. But we can imagine it. When we think of something, unless you can just think abstractly, which some people do, we need to represent what we're thinking about in the thought. And so you can't imagine in a graphic form all the sense qualities and parts of a dog simultaneously. We can't think like that. I mean, you can think abstractly like that. But if you want to actually, have that appear, so-called graphically in our mind, as it were, not that the mind is a thing or something, we would represent it with a generic form. This would be an imagined generic form that is totally conceptual, that occurs and can be cognized only by mind consciousness, not a sense consciousness. You know, there are 5 types of forms of physical phenomenon that are only objects of mental cognition. Madhyamaka asserts this, as does Chittamatra. Sautrantika doesn't assert any of these, and Vaibhashika only asserts one type of this. In any case, we have all 5 types of them, and one type of it is a totally conceptual, in other words, an imaginary object, which is what appears when we think of something, or when we visualize, or when we remember something. So we now are going to represent an individual item. You know, if we're going to think of a dog, we're going to represent it with a imaginary object, conceptual object. And that conceptual form, all we can think of, really, because our minds are limited, would be what would be a mental representation of a visual form of one side of the dog, of a dog. It would be like that, wouldn't it? That's what we think of if you think of a dog. So that would be what represents the dog. And that is the basis for imputation of a whole common sense dog. That part, that mental, what should we say? That conceptual form of a part. That would be only if we were wanting to think of a dog. Now, if we actually see this creature, remember there is the aspect, the mental hologram that reflects on the mind. That would be, in this case, that's the basis for imputation. So either we're seeing it, and the basis for imputation is that mental hologram, or the aspect that reflects from it of colored shape of, front of a head. Or if we're just thinking of a dog, that would be, totally imaginary, that part. Okay, that's the basis for imputation. So you have to fit together cognition theory and Madhyamaka, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Not that it doesn't make sense, but you don't understand it on a deep level. So an actual item, an actual whole common sense dog that fits into the category, into this category, so an actual one, is the implied object of the conceptual cognition. That's the implied object of the conceptual cognition. It can be, so a whole dog. It can be cognized through the filter of what's called the semi-transparent static phenomenon, the semi-transparent static phenomenon, affirmation phenomenon, any item, so the category of dog, any item, any thing that would fit into the category of dog, and then this imaginary conceptual object that appears. And through that, the implied object is an actual whole dog. See that part is representing a dog. That's the basis for imputation. And the implied object is the referent object implied by the conceptual cognition. It's conceptually labeled on the basis for labeling. Go more slowly. The referent object of the aspect, we're talking about the aspect of the category, a whole common sense dog. The referent object from that is some specific validly knowable phenomenon. That is a whole common sense dog. Is a mere conventionality, is what it's called. Remember, you can only, no, I'm reading what I wrote. Remember, we can only cognize one moment at a time of the visual information, a series of changing color shapes or pixels of what we would conventionally agree is the left side of a head. We can only establish the existence of a whole common sense dog on this basis for labeling the visual information of a side of a head by the fact that a whole common sense dog is the referent object of the conceptual cognition. The thought of a whole common sense dog as represented by an imagined, generic, totally conceptual form of one, of a part of one. Let's try to grasp what we're talking about here. How do you establish that there is such a thing as a dog, a whole object? Well, what we've seen is that all you can do, well, we have the category of a dog. There must be something that, it excludes everything that's not a dog. So in that category, anything that would fit into that category would be a dog. And we want to represent it by, a specific dog. So we think of just any general thing that comes to our mind of what would represent a dog. And we could only imagine the visual part of one part of it. That's if we wanted to think of a dog. If we see something, there's a reflection of a part on the mind. That's the aspect. That would represent what a whole dog is. So that's the basis for imputation. And the basis, what would be tied to that, is the implied object, what that implies. That implies a whole dog, an actual whole dog. That's what we're seeing. Even though we're seeing only a part, we're seeing an actual dog. So that is, that mental representation of a part. That's the basis for imputation. What we're imputing on that, what's tied to that, is that it actually represents a whole common sense dog. And what's implied by that is an actual whole common sense dog out there. That's the implied object. And remember, we are distinguishing here what it appears to be from how it exists. So just in terms of what it appears to be, that's called the mere conventionality. Tsongkhapa calls it. We'll say more about that in a little while. That's the mere conventionality. conventionally, we all agree that that's, this group of people have agreed that that's a dog. Okay. Now, what about the aspect of the category that's self-established existence, the appearance of self-established existence? Again, this aspect is an implicative negation phenomenon. It leaves in its footprint the negation phenomenon, not this category of self-established existence, and not any item that fits in this category. And the affirmation phenomenon, the category of self-established existence, and any item that fits in this category. So what we've excluded is everything that is other than self-established existence, and what is inside the circle here on the paper is anything that has any self-established existence of anything. Talking about the self-established existence itself. So that has to be implicit, would be a specific case of actual self-established existence. It would be represented by an imagined, totally conceptual, generic case of actual self-established existence. This is what's so difficult to recognize as the object of refutation. That is really difficult to recognize. What is an appearance of self-established existence? What appears in the mind in a conceptual cognition, or in any cognition, Tsongkhapa says. So we have a mental representation, a conceptual representation of self-established existence, but it is fake self-established existence because there is no such thing as self-established existence. So a representation of fake self-established existence or if we are seeing this dog, this thing, then not only is there a reflection, a mental hologram, you can, distinguish within that, differentiate within that mental hologram of what it is and a mental hologram of self-established existence. So that would be, and that it's fake. But according to Prasangika, we validly cognize something representing self-established existence. It is valid that what we cognize is fake self-established existence. We actually do cognize that. We don't cognize actual self-established existence, but we cognize fake self-established existence, something representing it. Now, remember, when we differentiated the mental hologram of representing a whole dog, the implied object was an actual whole dog. That conventionally exists. I mean, that there is, well, we'll get to that. The implied object exists, we can say. There is an implied object of an actual dog. There is no implied object of that fake self-established existence. There is no actual self-established existence. There is an actual dog, but there is no actual self-established existence. That, there's a voidness of that. There is no such thing. Now, the problem is that although we can conceptually isolate the appearance of what something is and the appearance of how it exists, they're inseparable. And so we see them together, and taken together, there's an appearance of a self-established dog, whole dog. There is no implied object of this as a whole, as a, in terms of the two of those together. There is no self-established dog. No such thing as a self-established dog. Such an implied object, a self-established dog, would be a findable referent thing. This is a different word. There's the referent object, which would be an actual whole common sense dog. When we have differentiated what it appears to be from how it appears to exist. That's the referent object. There is such a thing as actual dogs. But there is no such thing, no implied object taken as a whole in that, of a self-established dog. That self-established dog would be the referent thing. Different word from referent object. And that referent thing is we would call that a focal support. It is the support or basis of when you look at the dog, what you see. When you look at this part of a dog, what you see is what appears there. I mean, we see a referent object, a referent thing, a referent object, a whole dog, but there is no, basis that we're focusing on that is a focal support, a self-established dog. So that is so a self-established dog is what our mind seems to be aimed at, but there is no such thing. There's a whole dog and a fake appearance of self-established existence. But there is no actual thing that is self-established that is there. So it always, His Holiness always says, when that falls apart, falls away, this focal support, the absence of that focal support is the voidness of a dog. There is no focal support. Now, this word focal support, that word focal that I'm translating is the word aim And it is also translated as aim. So when we talk about unaimed compassion, it is compassion for the dog, which does not have a focal support of a self-established dog. That's unaimed compassion. So there's a difference between a focal support and a focal object. Focal object is what we're focusing on. An actual, a dog. Focal support would be a self-established dog. So now we get into impure appearances and pure appearances. The impure appearance, what appears to someone who is not an arhat, when they are not totally absorbed on voidness, what appears to them is the basis for labeling, the part, the visual information of the left side of a head appears as, this is the impure appearance, it appears as self-established as a whole common sense dog from its own side. That basis for labeling appears to be identical to the referent object, a whole dog. A whole, not the referent object, but the referent thing. It appears to be a referent thing. A whole self-established dog. So even though the appearance of this part has the individual defining characteristic marks of an object synthesis and a kind synthesis, that it is a whole object, an object synthesis, and a kind synthesis, that it's a dog, it appears that they have the power to establish by themselves or in conjunction with mental labeling the existence of a whole common sense dog on the basis of the part. They don't have the power to establish the existence. You can distinguish them, otherwise you couldn't distinguish this object from the wall. But they don't have the power by themselves, or when, when put into a category, to establish that it is a dog. Only in terms of what we've described as this very complex process of mental labeling with a concept. Now, there are two types of pure. So the impure appearance is that it is appearing to be self-established. That appearance is because of the habits of perceiving, grasping for self-established existence. When we talk about grasping, what usually is called grasping, that's the word to take an object cognitively. Has two aspects: to take it as an object of cognition and to take it to correspond to actual self-established existence. So we take it as an object of, it appears. So that habit makes it, that appearance of self-established existence, that fake appearance, and we take it to correspond to actual self-established existence, that there is the implied object. So that's the impure appearance. It appears like that, and we take it to correspond to actual self-established dog. For an arhat, this is the first level of pure appearance. It doesn't appear as if the self-established existence is being established from the side of the object by the power of that defining characteristic. Doesn't appear as though it's coming from that. So the arhat doesn't take it to actually be self-established, to correspond to self-established existence. However, the arhat recognizes that that appearance of self-established existence is being projected by the habit of grasping for self-established existence. So it still appears to be self-established, but the arhat knows it's not coming from the side of the object, it's coming from the side of their mind, basically. That's the pure appearance for an arhat. And the pure appearance for a Buddha is that there is no appearance of self-established existence, neither coming from the side of the object, nor coming from the side of the habit of grasping for self-established existence. Nevertheless, there is an appearance, and that is the mere conventionality. That's what a Buddha sees. That is the mere conventionality. So it's not conventional truth. Conventional truth is an appearance of self-established existence, of the self-established dog. But an appearance that does not have self-established existence coming from the side of the object or coming from the side of the projection of the mind. Now, that's very difficult to actually recognize, identify, or even imagine what it is. And remember, it's a dependently arising phenomenon, which means it's not like a still photograph. Because it dependently arises like that, dependent on this whole process of conceptual mental labeling, and because it functions, then there's nothing that you can stop and say, this is the mere conventionality, and point to it. So things function nevertheless. This is why when we understand voidness, to understand it fully, you have to understand the functionality of things. Nevertheless, they function, dependently arising, functioning. So that is what basically I wanted to explain in this session. It's complex, not easy to understand. This is, voidness is not easy to understand. Mental labeling is not easy to understand, but we need to differentiate here between coarse imputation phenomenon, coarse imputedly knowable phenomenon, I should say, and subtle imputedly knowable phenomenon. So we're not talking about the relation between persons and the well, let me refine that. Something, something is either, how to say this? validly knowable phenomenon are both, many of them, both coarsely imputably knowable and subtly imputably knowable. So when we talk about persons and the aggregates, then it's a coarsely imputably knowable phenomenon. It's fact that there is a person, that a person is tied to a basis. You can't have a person without aggregates. And I mean, you could have a body, but it's a dead body. It's not a person anymore. It's a corpse. And in addition, when you talk about subtly validly knowable, a whole and the parts, the same analysis applies to person and the aggregates. But that gets insanely complicated when you work out all the specific points of that. But I mean, this is what's confusing, because there's only one term that's used. Imputed, mentally labeled, designated. There's only one term. And you really need to understand, the refinement of all of this to really understand what Tsongkhapa is talking about when we talk about the focal support falling apart. His Holiness always says, when it disintegrates, it's not there to start with. But when what we imagine vanishes, the referent of what we imagine, there is no such thing. So there's nothing findable holding up the, what should we say? The appearance of a self-established dog. There is no actual self-established dog. Okay. Now there's a different non-Galupa explanation of this. We don't necessarily have to go there, because that's a whole other lecture, a whole other topic. But there you have a very sophisticated explanation as well. Okay, so now we can open it up to questions.
Are there any questions from the master students in the Gompa?
Hi, Dr. Berzin.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We had a discussion last week about positive and negative phenomena. Maybe I think you used.
I call it affirmation and negation.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you that. Is affirmation phenomena and positive phenomena the same? And we were just trying to come up with some examples, and somebody used the example darkness. So would this be a positive phenomena? One person said it was a positive phenomena, but on the other side, somebody said it was a negative phenomena because it's the absence of light. So
what was the word that you said?
Darkness.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a negation phenomenon. It is the absence of light. Sure. I mean, this gets, no, it's not necessarily. There are two opinions on this based on two sets of textbooks. In the majority position. I think that's the Jitsumba position, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up again. The majority, put it this way, the majority say that when the sound of the words negate the object to be negation, then what is tossed in the footprint? Is it only a negation phenomenon, or both a negation phenomenon and an affirmation phenomenon? Here, the word darkness does not have, the sound of that word does not have a negating word in it. Because it doesn't have a negating word in it, it's an affirmation phenomenon. In other words, I can see darkness. I don't have to first see light and then say there's no light in order to see darkness. I can see darkness by itself. It's an affirmation phenomenon. It's not dependent on seeing something else. That's the explanation.
Hey, Dr. Berzin. Amaya, thank you so much again. Actually, regarding to that question, it's just that we are trying to go over the negating and affirmation and so on and so forth. We also had, like if you say, like an empty refrigerator, so you can see in your head that the refrigerator is empty. But full refrigerator, someone was saying, also represent the fact that you cannot put anything in it. So is it a negation or is it an affirmation? We are kind of like wondering about that as well. And also, I was wondering, for instance, when we are looking for, like, emptiness itself is a negation, but I was just wondering, when you look for the emptiness of something, you find emptiness. So you find the emptiness of it is, in a way, an affirmation, but you find something that is a negation. So it's a little bit confusing, and we are trying to, go over that.
Okay. There's several questions there. In terms of a full refrigerator or a full cup of water, that's an affirmation. Just the fact that there is, there's no room for anything else, that's a negation phenomenon. But the fullness itself is an affirmation. So you'd have to look at it like that. In terms of emptiness or voidness, since this is one of my favorite topics and my favorite gripes about the way that it's translated, I will explain to you. Emptiness is appropriate for Svatantrika and below, where you have something that is conventionally findable, but is empty of something to be refuted about it. So there is a glass and it's empty of water. So emptiness, is, I mean, this is what Svatantrika says, that it is conventionally existent, but from a conventionally itself, it has a self-established existence, but on the deepest level, it's void of that, it's empty of that. Prasangika, voidness means it's the same word for zero. There is no such thing. So that's why I prefer voidness to emptiness. Emptiness implies that there is something that is empty. Okay, so I think this is an important difference to make. At least in English, there are these two words. In other languages, it might not be so easy.
Yeah, thank you.
Now,
So
you said about findable, that voidness or emptiness is findable. You have to findable. First of all, there isn't that word findable in Tibetan or in Sanskrit. So that's a Western way of talking about it. What you're talking about is that, there, remember we said, defining characteristic feature marks or features, it is convention. So a group of people made it up. That there are, what should we say, objects that are all dogs, or that there are objects, that there are things, and so on. Actually, we just perceive pixels. So there are things. This is also, so when there is contacting awareness of contact, but anyway, contact in general, of distinguishing and a characteristic mark, defining characteristic mark. So there's contact, it's not physical contact. It's not two ping pong balls, contacting like that, but there's this interaction in a sense. That's there. That happens. Otherwise, you couldn't distinguish anything. Findable means that it is that defining characteristic, which was agreed upon by convention, that which is a mere conventionality, that has the power by itself, or in terms of when it is, labeled, to establish the thing, to make it exist. That's what findable means. But conventionally, I can find my keys, I can find, conventionally we find things. So in terms of voidness or emptiness, there's a defining characteristic of emptiness, of voidness. But it doesn't have the power by itself to establish that this is voidness. We have, things are devoid of, there is no such thing. And we have, made up a convention of, given it a word of something that represents voidness. What appears in a conceptual cognition of voidness. You have something that represents it, fake voidness. And there is actual voidness, but not, actual fake voidness. That's complicated. I don't know if that came out straight. So, findability, there's a difference between, being able to cognize something and something being established from its own side. And the word findable being applied to that. It's very difficult, at our stage of translation to really not get confused about, these very specific, subtle points. Our language confuses things. That's why I find it so important to study, if you have the capacity, not just Tibetan, Sanskrit, the original language, because the Tibetan translations have similar problems, not as bad as our Western languages, but similar problems in connotation. Now, sometimes the connotation is very, very helpful, as with the word imputation, prajnapti, something that is caused by something else to be known, and dak, which is tied to something else. That's very helpful. Different connotations, but both describe the same thing from two different points of view. But sometimes with language, it doesn't work. The problem with Tibetan that I've found, as great as Tibetan is, and as incredible a job the translators did, I'm not denigrating that in any way, but the language is not as sophisticated as Sanskrit. And it doesn't have as large a vocabulary as Sanskrit. So when a Sanskrit text differentiates 5 or 6 different things, and the Tibetan only has 2 or 3 words for it, these 5 or 6 things get mixed up. And then it becomes very difficult to understand in Tibetan translation what the text is talking about, what point it's making. That's why, if you really want to go into depth and precision, you need to learn Sanskrit. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, we are very privileged with the translators that we have here. Can I ask just one more question?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm not denigrating, translations into Western language.
yeah.
I think it's possible to, but our terminology needs to be, we need to be flexible with it and be willing to make, revise our translation terms. Tibetans revise their translation terms. Geshe Gawa Targe always pointed out to me that almost every text in the Kangyur and Tengyur was re-edited and revised. The original translation was not, used. So no matter what you do, it can be revised, it can be improved. This, I think, is essential for, we need more and more precision. But I don't think that it's impossible with our languages. Yeah. Next question.
Pronto? Eccoci. Ok. Salve, dottor Berzin, grazie. La farò in italiano, ovviamente, la domanda. Volevo vedere se ho capito una cosa, perché lei parla di apparenza impura, che è una falsa apparenza di esistenza autostabilita a causa dell'abitudine di afferrarsi all'autostabilito, appunto. E stavo pensando, è qualcosa che si riferisce alla concezione? Sì. Ah.
Someone needs to translate for me.
Ok. Ok, non so. No, non saprei dire.
Do you
Proviamo.
have a translator there?
Yeah.
I will try, Dr. Berzin. So,
Chiedo se è una concezione innata.
So it's impure appearance and innate conception.
Innate conception? What does that
Yes.
mean?
These are the notes that I'm reading.
Sì, sì,
So-
hanno a che fare con la concezione innata, in quanto
Yes. Is impure appearance innate conception? This is the question in few words.
Impure appearance.
Yeah.
Well, innate is again in English, and I don't know about in Italian. I mean, just as an aside to start with, innate and inherent are quite different. An innate quality is something that is a part of something. It is, like the size of something or the weight of something. It's innate. It's a part of it. It is it's a fact. Inherent is used for in self-established existence, that there's something on the side of an object that has the power to establish that it exists. Those are two different words. So is there, the question was an innate concept? What was the question? Innate what? Impure appearance, does that have innate? What
yes,
was it?
It looks that this is the question. Impure appearance, is it impure appearance a innate conception?
Okay, impure appearance, an appearance is not a conception. I mean, by conception.
Innate conception of true existence, have been said.
Oh, innate
Conception of true existence.
An impure object would be what would correspond to a okay, now we get another complication. It would be what corresponds to that category or concept of self-established existence, so-called inherent existence. That would be the impure appearance. Now, is that conceptual category innate? That's another question. It's a very interesting question. If it were innate, then it could never be removed. And there could never be it would prevent the purity of the mind. I mean, it would obstruct the purity of the mind. So it is not innate. Innate is an inseparable quality of something. That word innate. I mean, I don't know how you understand the word, but there are two different words in Sanskrit and Tibetan. Innate would be something that simultaneously arises with something else. Well, not everything that simultaneously arises is automatically simultaneously arises. Like clear light mind and the cognition of voidness. They're not, they don't automatically arise, but you want to get them, together, but you want to get them to arise together. But innate, as I said, it's like weight or size. It's an innate, it's an actual factual quality of something. There is, there are, and inseparable. We can think without concept. I mean, we can cognize things without putting them into categories. That's just, visual cognition. We see something, we don't necessarily fit it into a category. Does it, I think your question is, does it innately fit into a category? Well, in a sense, this is what you do in analytical meditation. You try to make sense of this. So in a sense, there are individually characterized, how to say this? There are defining characteristic marks of something that can be distinguished. One is an individual defining characteristic, and one is a shared or generally characterized mark. So, we see this thing over here. It is an individual item, an individual dog, but, so there is, what distinguishes it as an individual item. It's not, that other dog over there. But there is a general characterized or a shared characteristic mark of it being a dog that is shared by many other, living beings. Is it innate? Well, remember, we had object syntheses and kind syntheses. Object synthesis, it's an individual item, a whole object. Kind synthesis, it's a kind of object, so that's the generally characterized mark. And there are many of those with an object. It's a dog, it is a mammal, it is an animal. All of these are generally, the categories that it fits into. The category would be what is put together. This is a conceptual synthesis of all items having this shared characteristic. Is the shared characteristic mark? No, well, it's made up. It's not found on the side of the object. It's not inherent, but it's innate. That's a very fine distinction. Okay. Someone else?
There is one question left in the chat by Paolo, who says, would you say that appearing object and aspect are two terms for the same thing?
The appearance of something I'm just wondering here. Aspect. There are different words that are, I think, lumped together with the word aspect. The aspect, can be a reflection on the in a cognition of something. There's an appearance out there. I mean, is there an appearance out there? This is really the question. Chittamatra says no, of course. There is no appearance out there. So actually, you can't say that there's an appearance out there. An appearance is just how it appears to a mind. You know, a reflection on a mind, but there isn't something out there findable that then is reflecting on the mind. This is, you know, the paradox. You know, when the fly looks at the dog, the top of the head of the dog, and I look at the top of the head of the dog, the appearance is quite different. Is there an actual head of a dog that is appearing differently to different minds? Well, you can't say that. You can't say that. You can't speak of objects, you know, independently of the cognition of them. This is the, you know, the insight that we get from Chittamatra. So appearance, aspect, I mean, aspect can also refer to different qualities. Again, you have to really distinguish. But if you're talking just about the reflection on the mind, then you could say that that's the appearance. Yeah. There seems to be another question.
Yeah, there's one last question from a master program student. I will read it. Good afternoon, Dr. Berzin. Given that mind appearances arise from sensory information that in turn arise because of the natural mirror-like cognitive ability of the mind.
Can you read that more slowly? Start again.
Sorry. Given that mind appearances arise from
appearances.
Appearances arise from sensory information.
Central information?
Sensorily. From sense.
Sensorily?
From senses. Sensorily.
Sensorily, yeah,
Yes.
information, okay.
That in turn arise because of the natural mirror-like cognitive ability of the mind.
Yeah.
Can we define the life experience as a conceptual dreamlike state of dependent arising?
A lifelike appearance?
A dreamlike state of the life experiences.
Life's experiences,
Life
yeah.
experience as a conceptual dreamlike state of dependent arising between the mind and the objects without anything certain outside the mind holograms based on the senses, which themselves arise because of the mind, both causing one another to appear, similar to a loop of mutual cause and effect. Forgive my wording, thank you. It's written in the chat if it's easier for you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Dependent arising, there aren't, if you talk about things, a thing as as a thing would be something encapsulated in plastic, to use an analogy. So something encapsulated in plastic. Things don't exist like that. They appear like that, but they don't exist like that. They couldn't interact if they were encapsulated, if they were isolated, self-established inside this plastic encasement. Things don't exist like balloons or ping pong balls like that. So everything is very dynamic. without findable things. Is it like a dream? Is life experiences like a dream? Yes, it is like a dream. This is why Chandrakirti, who refuted Dharmakirti in terms of cognition, valid cognition, and he asserted that analogy is a valid means of cognition. So illusion-like or dream-like, you can understand, how things function by an analogy of dreams or an illusion. But that doesn't mean that it is the same as a dream or an illusion. So, dreaming of killing somebody and actually killing somebody, they're quite different in terms of the effect, cause and effect. So when things are described as being dreamlike, life's experiences, like a dream, there is nothing self-established that is functioning in the dream. So this is, I think, where confusion can arise. Things are like an illusion. That doesn't mean that they are an illusion. This is Galupa, mind you. Non-Galupa is going to be different. Things are an illusion. Everything is a conceptual construct. Nevertheless, cause and effect functions. So there they take the Heart Sutra very literally. The bottom line is functionality works. Whether we conceive of, mere conventionalities or everything is a conceptual construct. Okay. There was another question, I believe. You're muted.
Okay, so the last question is when
Última pergunta.
when Dr. Berzin spoke of how for a Buddha there neither appears to be self-established existence coming from the side of the object nor from the side of the mind, did I understand correctly that what a Buddha sees is what Dr. Berzin called the mere conventionality? And
yes.
And that he said in this context, when he said there is nothing left to point to, this is in reference to how we, ordinary beings, try to understand this, but cannot because we always have the concept of self-establishment when we observe/cognize.
Right. We can conventionally point, but you can't point to something which is self-established. I can point at the screen. So we can point, but you can't find something. I mean, there's nothing actual, self-established existence that can be cognized. There's only fake, what appears to be like that. So mere conventionality, kunzoptsam in Tibetan, is the term that Tsongkhapa uses. I think he, invented that term. Mere conventionality. Discusses that in Lamrim Chemo. Anything else?
Okay,
Dr. Berzin, yes, sorry, I have one last question. It's Maya again. We had a whole debate, quite a stormy one, I have to say, in a certain point, about whether when a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound or not? some of us, some of
There's
us
a cartoon
strongly
like
believe.
that. There's a cartoon like that. And there's a bubble over the tree and it says, "Oh shit." This is what the sound that the tree makes when it falls.
I will remember that next time. We can have a caricature of this. But I was wonder, because of this had some people would say no and some people would say yes, and I would really love to hear your perspective on this.
Well, the question is really that is addressed by Chittamatra, mind only, is that how do you establish that that an object exists the moment before it's cognized? You see, this was the Sautrantika position that when we talk about external phenomenon, what is an external phenomenon? An external phenomenon is something that exists before it's cognized, that already exists. So this now becomes very problematic because in terms of mental, the Chittamatra and says it exists because there's an appearance, and Svatantrika also says it exists because it appears. So that's in connection with the mind, and it exists because there's a concept. The concept refers to something. Is the Prasangika point of view, and that also is in conjunction with mind, with cognition. So is there any way to establish that something exists independently of either the mind making an appearance of it or the mind conceptualizing about it? And you would have to say no from a Prasangika point of view. So there's no way of establishing that the tree makes a sound unless there's a recording device or some being that is a reliable source of information that witnessed it. So there is no answer to the question from a Prasangika point of view. It can't be can't be established to exist or not to exist from its own side. In other words, self-established by itself, falling in the tree, in the forest. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Berzin.
Okay, well, we hope that Dr. Berzin comes back again to be our guest to answer all these interesting
for
questions.
sure. It's exactly 4:30, by the way.
Yes.
For the moment.
Very punctual. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Berzin, for this session once again. And thank you all for attending.
And do send me the link for where it is online.
The recording? To access the recording of today's session, all of you will receive an email with the link. And for those interested in further study, the FPMT Masters Program at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute offers a full-time opportunity to study Tibetan Mahayana Buddhism, integrating academic study, practice, and service. So to learn more about the Masters Program, you can scan this QR code. And to stay informed about our upcoming events, you can subscribe to our newsletter on this one. And so thank you all for your participation, and we look forward.
If you can make advertising, I can make advertising as well. The commercial at the end.
Yes, of course, it has to.
And if you want to read more about these topics that we've been discussing, go to studybuddhism.com in Italian, 37 languages. So take your pick.
Thank you. And we look forward also to welcome you all to our next MP talk on the 10th of June with Venerable Gache on reverse consequence and commonly appearing subjects. So the link for the event is on the chat. So thank you again so much, Dr. Berzin.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.